Welcome to the Gary Wilkerson podcast. Glad we're here together with a good friend and a true man who's making an impact in the world, Nate Larkin. Thanks for coming back on our show again.
Oh, well, thanks for having me back. It's such a joy.
I wanted to get in with you because we didn't really discuss it a whole lot last time we talked, but the whys, why we get addicted, why we stay addicted, why when we're trying not to be addicted, we're still addicted. And why do we go back to it after maybe we've been sober and clean for a certain amount of time. So let's just start off with the why. You mentioned, and I think you alluded to it a little bit earlier, trauma. Would that be one of the main reasons why we move towards some form of addiction?
Sure. I think at the bottom of sexual addictions in particular, that's really what I can speak most. I have the most information about. Right.
That's first where you have your, right. That's where you have your doctorate. Huh?
Patrick Carnes, Dr. Patrick Carnes, is kind of the pioneer of the field who wrote the first big book on sex addiction, Out of the Shadows, back in the 80s, has said that it's kind of unfortunate that we adopted the terminology sex addiction when we did. It's because that brought some baggage. He said perhaps it's better understood and described as an intimacy disorder. If there's one, I firmly believe that we are made for intimacy. We are relational beings. We're made in the image of God, who himself is a relational being. Three persons in perfect union and harmony, enjoying each other constantly. And we were made to be in relationship with each other, in relationship with him. And so we have this drive toward intimacy. But if we receive the message and believe the message that intimacy is dangerous or unattainable or is not available for us, if we are defective in some way, we can get that message through a harsh word or a slap in the face. We can also get it just from silence and neglect, where we have these needs as infants, right? To be seen, to be soothed, to be safe, to be secure. And all parents, no matter how well-intentioned, are limited in their capacities. And so, at any rate, if those needs aren't met, and we begin to internalize the belief that if people really knew us, they'd reject us. That intimacy, true intimacy, is dangerous and perhaps not even something we're entitled to or we're ever going to be able to enjoy. But nonetheless, we experience loneliness, especially and it hits especially hard in adolescence, right? So as children, we identify completely with our parents, and our parents tell us who we are and what we believe. We're in a tribe. We have this. And then comes adolescence, and now we start to individuate. We're moving away from our parents, right? So the great prize of adolescence is independence, but its great price is loneliness. So now I have a drive to connect. I'm lonely. I don't know how to. And if at that point of vulnerability, where I don't have this confidence that I am loved and lovable, made for intimacy, and I can move without fear toward intimacy, and I can connect deeply, and some form of artificial intimacy is available to me, that is practically irresistible. And pornography today, especially now in its video forms, and we're moving toward, virtual reality, which is even more immersive. We're moving towards sensory suits and all kinds of stuff that will be able to simulate a sexual experience. With that kind of technology coming at our culture, especially when boys and girls are just crossing the threshold into adulthood.
we're built for intimacy.
Yeah.
And yet men sort of reject that concept. They're like, I don't need intimacy. I need success. I need fame. I need power.
Yeah.
Do you know where that comes from? Like, why would a man say, all that talk about intimacy is feminine?
Yeah. Exactly. I think part of that is cultural, and certainly we live in a highly individualized Western culture.
Yeah.
And I think also let's just talk about the flesh too, right? Because intimacy says, my need for intimacy tells me that I am not really 100% complete. I need other people.
Yeah.
That's a blow to the ego, right?
There you go. Spot on.
Yeah. I don't mind being needed. I just don't want to need anyone.
Yeah. So that could be the starting point for rejecting a desire for intimacy. I think also maybe you could comment on what you talked about earlier, the woundedness in a sense, whether it be abandonment or what was the other one?
Abuse, right?
Abuse or abandonment. Yeah. So the abuse is the physical or the verbal. You're an idiot. You're worthless. I wish you were never born.
Right.
And then the abandonment is like, just, I'm not telling you I hate you, but I'm just not there for you.
Right.
Both of those create a vacuum of intimacy I don't have.
Right.
I was built for this. God made me this way, but I'm not getting it.
Yeah.
So as I get older now, I kind of put on that false armor, Saul's armor of saying like, I don't need intimacy. Or a little shot of pornography, once a week can give me the sense of intimacy. Sorry.
Yeah. And if in that state of vulnerability, by the way,
talk about at a young age.
Or on through adolescence.
Okay, yeah.
If that need for intimacy, by the way, when I say intimacy, I'm not using it in a sexual sense.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, no.
Right?
Right, meeting the need.
But if that need is sexualized in an inappropriate way, with an older person of the same or opposite gender, for example, or in an abusive way or in a seductive way or grooming way, and so it feels like my need for intimacy has been met, but it also has been sexualized. Now I'm hooked. Yeah. And I can find myself dragged down a corridor I never intended to enter.
Yeah.
And it seems as though the more I resist it, the stronger it becomes.
Do you know why that is? Why would it get stronger when you're resisting it?
I think because it is a learned behavior. There is, by the way, there's a great book. It's not a Christian book, but a good theoretical book by Maya Salowitz called Unbroken Brain, where she makes the argument that addiction is best understood as a learning disorder. It's a learned behavior. So we learn by repetition. So every time I do something, I either create or strengthen a neural pathway.
Yeah.
And so it's with each iteration of that cycle, it gets stronger. And then I begin to identify with that behavior. That is me. I am the person who does that.
And the resistance is fighting against your actual brainwave chemical.
Yeah, and so resisting it, it's almost like I'm lifting weights. I'm strengthening the thing I'm fighting against.
Yeah. And then you also have the biblical understanding of the law, how the law works. It's like, don't eat that apple. I want to eat that apple. So there's, the thing that you're told not to have is our sin nature is kind of built that way. But so like abandonment or abuse, then so you're coming out with needs. You have needs, and then the pornography, the sexual addiction, the want fulfills that thing that's kind of missing, right?
And if there's a big layer of shame on top of it, and that shame can come as much by silence. So I grew up in a home where we didn't talk about sex at all.
Right.
At all. So I was not, so the message I received was sex is something you can never talk about. So when I began to have my sexual struggles, I knew that was one thing that I couldn't come to my parents with that. I couldn't bring it up at church. I couldn't say it.
Yeah.
And felt intense shame. And the way we handled it back then with what we called our version, there is, by the way, healthy accountability, but we had this unhealthy version of accountability, which was shame-based. And so the idea was you would covenant to confess to your accountability partner whenever you crossed the line. But the shame, knowing that that would be a shameful experience, would keep you from doing it, right? So we were going to shame our way out of shame-based behavior, and it just made me a better liar. Really. Yeah.
Wow, it's like sticking dynamite in another box of dynamite. It's going to set it off. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So I've understood that too. The shame being a part of this recycle or the cycle of moving back into the addiction or to the struggle that you're having. The I don't know about you, but for me there was never any abuse in a sense. Like mom and dad were both kind, and in-laws and other people in my life were always aunts and uncles kind, but there was a busyness around our activity. I think that for me, that's what created my empty spot inside of me, this need for in intimacy that pornography filled. That it was a sense of that. And so, and I've studied something in the past few years that the abusive nature, like if you've been hit or sexually abused, you kind of know it, although some people try to cover it. Right. You kind of know that it's happening, and so you're more apt to deal with it when you're younger. Yes. Whereas if it's just neglect, there's this tendency to say, like, it wasn't that bad. My dad never once hit me and stuff. Yeah. And so you never really deal with it. Yes. But yet both of them are, I've heard some people say that the abandonment issues are as weighty as the abusive ones. Right. But then you don't deal with it, and so you're exacerbating it to the point of intensifying it and stuff. Do you see that a lot as well? Oh, absolutely. And we see it in Samson, and I hear therapists, we'll say the same thing, that about 80% of the guys who will come, and again, the therapists I work with deal almost exclusively with men. So they'll do a trauma egg or some kind of a trauma history thing on the front end. We're learning guys' story. And if you ask these guys, what's the abuse in your story? 80% will say, no abuse. I grew up, great family. 80%, that's a lot. Okay, and it was a good family, and your parents did love you. Yeah. And it is not being disloyal to your parents to say that as much as they loved you, they were not able to give you everything you needed. And there were other things that took precedence. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. I hate to do this, but we think we need to take a break. Okay. Because we've sort of presented the problem of why somebody's addicted and getting into these things, and then now someone will say, "Okay, come back next week." But let's do that. You can join us next week, and we'll talk more about the recovery end of things, the healing end of things, and sort of what God has in store for us as He has so clearly done in your life. And so, Nate, thanks for being with us today, and we'll look forward to catching up with you again next week.
The Gary Wilkerson Podcast is brought to you by World Challenge, transforming lives through the message and mission of Jesus Christ. Each week, this podcast reaches thousands of listeners. This critical work is made possible by the generous contributions of individuals like you who believe in World Challenge's mission. Thank you for listening and supporting.